In this week's Parshas BeHalosecha, it says, "Umadua lo yiresim ledaber ba'avdi b'Moshe." Why were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moshe? Rashi is bothered by the repetition. Why does if it's ba'avdi, why does he have to say b'Moshe? And if it says b'Moshe, why does he have to say ba'avdi? So Rashi says you should have been afraid to speak of him against him if he were my servant, even if he weren't Moshe. And you should have been afraid to speak against Moshe, even if he weren't my servant. In the town of Staria, it was one of those places in Eastern Europe where you had both Hasidim and Misnagdim living in the same place, and they often, almost always, didn't get along. Reb Aryeh Leib Heller, the author of the Ketos HaChoshen, was the Rav of the Shtut, the Rav of the city, and he didn't get along with the Hasidim that were almost all of them followers of the Chozeh of Lublin, Rabbi Yaakov Yitzchak. And they treated the Rav with a significant measure of contempt, and it came to a point where the Rav put them in cherem for 30 days. And the majority of the townspeople stayed away from these Hasidim, even other Hasidim that were not so chutzpahdik to the Rav, that hadn't been put in the cherem, stayed away from these Hasidim. So they decided that they would go to Lublin to spend the time with their Rebbe, that they were going to be in the cherem where they would receive a warmer welcome. Now, the Shamash of the Chozeh, every time Hasidim would come, every day he would make a list of the Hasidim that were there, and the Chozeh would say when he would meet with the different ones. When his Shamash brought him the list of these Hasidim, he said, "I'll meet with them in 2 weeks and 5 days," which was the exact day that the 30-day cherem would end. At the end, when the Chozeh met with them, he said, there is a halacha that there are different drachim in the Avodas Hashem. He means halacha here, not a law, but a pathway, the way we go. Some people are very medactic in halacha, are experts in halacha, and they are a Moshe. There are other people that do Avodas Hashem belev, with tefillah, emotion, the way they perform certain mitzvahs, and they are avdi. You have to respect someone who's a Moshe and someone who's an avdi because of each of their different ways of Avodas Hashem. Each one is completely legitimate. This one has this way, this one has that way. Umadua lo yiresim ledaber ba'avdi v'Moshe. You should have been afraid to speak against Reb Aryeh Leib Heller, who is a phenomenal Talmud Chacham, who is a great Moshe, even though he's not an Avdi. The respect necessary to Rabbanim and Talmidei Chachamim exists even if their derech is different. There's a very similar thing. It's Shemitah year, of course, this year, and there was the Pulmus Shemitah, of course, during the first two Shemitahs, or I should say second two Shemitahs of the Yishuv. The first Shemitah, there was almost immediately after they arrived, they weren't growing anything anyway. So there was no real issue of keeping the Shemitah. Second and third one, there was significant discussion. In the second one, there was a huge fight over Heter Mechira. In the third one, Rabbi Yehoshua Leib Diskin accepted it, and the Rabbanei Yerushalayim accepted it. So there wasn't a fight until another 14 years, when Rav Naftali Hertz had passed away, and Rav Kook had replaced him as the Rav of Yafo and the Moshavos. And as they translate in those days, in the English side of the station there, it says Jaffa in the colonies. And the Rav of Tzvas in those days was the Reed Baz. And the Reed Baz very much opposed the Heter Mechira. And Rav Kook and the Reed Baz wrote letters back and forth. The Totzah of these letters from Rav Kook's side was the Sefer Shabbos Haaretz. But during this time, there was a group in Yafo that was supporting the Reed Baz, and they decided that they didn't want to have a shechita, slaughterhouse, under the supervision of Rav Kook, and they opened their own shechita, their own slaughterhouse under their own supervision versus Rav Kook's supervision. And at this point, the Reed Baz put them in cherem. And they traveled to Tzvas, and they said, Rebbe, we did this l'chvod chad, l'chvod hashita shel Rav, to honor you, because you are the Rav that opposes the Heter Mechira, and Rav Kook is mizalzel in Kedushas Haaretz, and selling the land to non-Jews. And the Reed Baz responded, just because Talmidei Chachamim have a debate has nothing to do with it. He's still the Rav of Yafo, and there never was in the history of Klal Yisrael a shechita that wasn't under the hashgacha of the Rav. We have to respect other people's derech avoda. The way I serve Hashem is not the way someone else serves Hashem. We all have the same basics, but where do you develop from there? What do you do? How do you do it? To say, mine is the only derech Hashem, derech avodas Hashem, the only way to serve my Maker, is a great problem. Many ways are acceptable within halacha. When you open up the Sifrei Halacha, Sifrei Machshava, the legalistic works, the philosophical works, you find that there are different ways of drawing closer to Hashem. Everyone should seek out what works best for them, that is within the rubric of Yiddishkeit, and what works best for them, that's what they should do. They should not be doing, this person does this person does this, therefore I should be doing this, I should be doing that. It is a huge element of Avodas Hashem to find the things that work for you best, while understanding that what works for me may not work for someone else, or that what is best for me is second best for someone else. What is best for him is not what's best for me. I was once talking to Ramesh Feinstein Shamash, and he told me that it wasn't uncommon that two people would come in with the exact same shaila and get very different answers. Because part of being a meshiv, part of responding to a shaila, means that you have to know the shoel, you have to know the person that's asking. You have to know where he's trying to go, where he's getting, what his problems are, what his issues are. It's very important when it says Aseh lecha Rav, that you have a Rav that knows who you are, knows how you have to grow. Not how he has to grow, but he has to know how you have to grow. So there has to be a relationship between the Rebbe and the Talmid, and the Talmid and the Rebbe, the Balabais and the Rav, and so on, in order for each person to grow in the way that they should be growing. Everyone should have a Shabbos where they find their own way to Hashem.